Did you think that slavery and ensuing Jim Crow laws had a lasting impact on the black community in the United States?
Some, and that's a good question. So,
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Nanifia Scarlett. Today you're back again with another video from Charlie Kirk. So today Charlie Kirk humiliates race-baiting sociology students. Okay, this is going to be interesting. So guys, without further ado, let's get started.
Did you think that slavery and ensuing Jim Crow laws had a lasting impact on the black community in the United States?
Some, and that's a good question. So if you correlate all the impact of Jim Crow and slavery, I would say that you could generously say 26% single motherhood in the black community in the 1960s. So about 26% of all black babies born in the 1950s and 1960s were born to a single mother. Now it's 77%. So I would ask you, why did it jump 50 points, 50%, since the Civil Rights Act as America got significantly less racist?
So that's fine. I don't know why it jumped. Who cares? But
Well, it wasn't slavery or Jim Crow. It
No.
was something else.
So the only lasting impact that slavery had on the U.S. was that less black families had fathers.
No, not necessarily. But have you ever known anyone that's owned a slave?
No, but I know a few presidents who did.
You know them personally? So you know anyone that was ever a slave?
Well, no, because So okay, I don't know anyone who was a slave. So it had no impact?
No, it had some impact. The question is, did it have an impact that is measurable and significant enough now in 2021, where we saw a key metric that influenced the livelihood of the black community, like single motherhood rate, that as America got less racist, all of a sudden now 77% of black babies are born without a father, where before it was 26%. And I suppose the question is this, because this is the question about systemic racism, right? What law that is in practice today actively discriminates against black people?
So here's what I would say to that. The idea of capitalism and America, like you said, is it doesn't matter who you are, show me what you got, is fresh start. So what would happen if you had like 150 years in a country for your family to build wealth, to own a house, to have a job, to get college education for your kids, to build generational wealth. And then you took another family who didn't have the opportunity to do any of that for 150 years and then set them off on the same even starting point. Is that really an even starting point? And would that not result in some kind of systemic disadvantage for those people?
The black middle class was the fastest growing demographic in the 1940s and 1950s until the Great Society Act and that intervention. It's very tempting to do what you're doing. And I'm not faulting you for it, because you've probably been propagandized to believe it. And that's okay, because I think you're actually a victim in this case, because you've been misled to want to believe that things you never lived under, never understood, and that I think you are partially seeing had a disproportionate impact in the world that you're living in today. So for example, if that were to be true, then first-generation immigrants would not be able to quickly be able to make good choices and move up the ladder in this country, which I think we have some first-generation immigrants here tonight. Now, let me say this, that this idea that America is systemically racist to the core would also be quickly debunked by the fact that more blacks have legally immigrated to America since the 1980s than ever were here brought as slaves. Over 2 million blacks from the Caribbean and from Nigeria and from Western Africa have come here to America. So the question is, why is it that in every statistic that you could probably rattle off, are black people doing worse than white people? What is it? Well, I would point to the fact that fathers are not in the home, because it was 26% of black females in the 1960s were single mothers. Now it's 77%. If you look at the Brookings Institution, a liberal think tank, there are 3 things you need to do to stay out of poverty in America. Number 1, graduate high school. Well, because of public sector unions and the dominance of our government schools, that's harder than ever in far too many communities. Not just black communities, not just Hispanic communities. The second thing, get a job, any job. And the third thing is to obviously not to commit crimes, but to try to get married before you have children. And so some of what I believe has contributed to the downfall of some of these communities has nothing to do with white people with the neck on black people. Instead, it's the following. Fathers no longer being in the home, the rise of sexual anarchy that came in post-1960s liberalism that removed this idea of sex being confined to a marital relationship, to be gratuitous and everywhere. All of a sudden you've seen an increase in not just the birth rate, but the single motherhood rate and abortion alongside of it. I would just ask this question, I'm just curious. How much do you think outputs are based on people's decisions, based on the advantages they're born into?
I mean, as someone who's taken Introduction to Sociology, your life is greatly influenced by what the conditions you're born into. But I promise this will be the last thing. Just, you say there's less fathers in the home of, many black families,
yes.
And that's the issue. So what do you think is keeping fathers out of the home in those?
It's a great question.
Do you think it could be over-policing and police arresting, disproportionately?
We went through this, everybody.
Do you think it could be law enforcement disproportionately enforcing laws in black neighborhoods and arresting more black males than any other demographic?
So blacks are actually under-arrested and under-policed per the percentage of crimes they commit. We talked about some of those numbers. But let me tell you one thing in particular. In the Great Society Act, we decided as a civilization to subsidize single motherhood. In the 1960s, we told black women you no longer need to be married to have children, you can get married to the government. And we saw a dramatic escalation and increase of the deterioration of the nuclear family and a replacement of that of the nanny state and the welfare state. And I would say this, that every single activist group that steps up, that talks about systemic racism and oppression, if you look at the data, purely the data, if there is a movement to put black fathers back in the home and to try and challenge the sexual anarchy that came in the post-1960s and had a more prudent and pious view of sexual relations in America, which is a very unpopular view, by the way, for most Americans, but it's true that before the 1960s, sexual relations were, at least culturally, supposed to always be confined to marital relationships. The more gratuitous that we have been in trying to catalog it in media and in pop culture and in Hollywood and, yes, in schools, then all of a sudden you have seen people say, well, why do I need to get married for that? Marriage is the bedrock institution, and strong families create strong communities, which create strong civilizations. And this is why immigrant communities that have come to America, and first-generation immigrants, they're able to move so quickly up the socioeconomic ladder because they might not have wealth, they might not have big bank accounts, they might not own a lot of land, but they have the thing they know that will keep them together, which is a family that will not be broken up at any means necessary. I'll finally say this. Let me just say this. No, I want to thank you for coming because it took courage to ask that question. I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Please forget everything you learned in Introduction to Sociology 101 because it was likely all garbage. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think I like that. I really did enjoy this. Sometimes when we really have this conversation about this racism, I tend to feel uncomfortable. I tend to get so much furious and anxious. But today I think it's all about the studies and it's all about the analysis. And I think Charlie said it all. Sometimes they always ask, why is this black community overexposed to crime, policing rates, the rates at which we arrest them, and I think it's true. Before, when Charlie always talk about these scenarios is as a result of lack of fathers at home. I barely agree with it, but I think it's true because even normal in morality, they say charity begins at home, and if you have a complete family, sometimes that's why he made this, he cited this example, like this Hispanic or this Asia, these people, when they migrate to America, they don't have resources, they don't have riches, they don't have enough capitals or business, but then they tend to be happy because the one thing that joins them together, the one thing that keeps them together is the family, you know. And it's so true. If you have a complete family, you know, I think the probability of the family growing, you know, becoming unique is very high, you know. And I think it's true, it's so true. If a single mother takes care of a child, you know, you could see the difference how the child grown up to become. And if a single father also take care of a child, you know, like it's different. But if a union, a complete family, if you grow up within a complete family, the probability of you going wayward is low, you know, it's so low. And I think he's so right. And he making this analysis that 50% in the 60s, 1960s, 50% of the black community, they will say they grew up without a father, or the divorce rate, or the growing up as a single mom, taking care of a child, was 55%. And now, as it stands now, it has increased to 75%, which is so huge. And it's something that it needs to be talked about. It's very bad, you know, it's very bad. Because if a complete family takes care of children, I'm sure by now this crime rate, this overpolicing, this what we always talk about every time, I think it would have reduced, or it will be reduced, you know. And this, what are we doing about this? And I like the question I said, so what is keeping the fathers away from the children? Or what is keeping, when it comes to the black community, what is keeping the father away from the children, or away from the family? And he asks, is it the overpopulation there in the black community, or the crime rate in the black community that is keeping the fathers away from the community? And Charlie said no. Sometimes you grow up in the black community, and most of the men are in prison. Most of the men have been accused of crime and being in prison and being jailed. And sometimes I understand, maybe that's why they are away from their children. And I think some too, 50% of it too is divorce, as a broken home, divorce. And Charlie said, with civilization going on, the black community, the government tends to take care of the single parents, that there's something they called, you get married to the government. So I think there's a social welfare that helps take care of the children, you know. There are some resources as a single mom you get from the government. So obviously I don't need my husband, I don't need a man in my life, and which is very bad. Because if you compare, Charlie made a video about the comparison between the black family and the Asian, the Hispanic community. You know, when they migrate from their countries to America, one thing for sure is that they build their family, and they always have this complete family. And that's something that always help them. Because if you train children, or if you nurture children with a serene home, with a complete family, mom, father, siblings around, I think the turnout of the children becomes different, you know, morally, and physically, emotionally, and morally, it becomes different. It becomes positive. The turnout becomes positive. And when they migrate, what keeps them together is the family and their policies. You go to school, you find a job, you get married. And obviously, if you go to school, you find a job, you get married, nothing concerns you on crime, nothing concerns you on crime rates or those things. But then he said, in the black communities, the rates at which they give birth without fathers, or the divorce rates within them, is very high. So that's probably causing the overcrime rate in the. And I think, yeah, it's true. Somewhere I agree with him, because I think family, complete family, a serene home, a healthy family, plays a vital role when it comes to raising children, or when it comes to nurturing, or having a positive outcome of nurturing children, I think family plays a vital role.